Good evening and welcome back to Fireplace Conversations with the Namibian Institute of Corporate Governance. My name is Vinsha Klute. I'm the Executive Director of the NICG, and tonight I'm speaking on, well, not me, but my guests are speaking on a conversation that's very near and dear to our heart, transforming beleaguered public enterprises into healthy entities. And you know, some public enterprises face financial difficulties that cripple them from operating functionally and optimally. And in the past, Air Namibia was shut down as a result. And currently you have the examples of Transnamib and Midco that are contemporary beleaguered entities. And these entities depend on the government bailout more than not, thus straining the state coffers. And welcome back to Fireplace Conversations. With me, the speakers are they've both served in leadership positions that have exposed them to beleaguered as well as healthy entities. And we wish to learn from them just how we can conform or transform beleaguered entities, particularly public enterprises, into healthy entities. With me, I'll start with Dr. Statler. I have Dr. Statler. He's a husband to Dr. Lillian Gezami Statler, and he likes their son, Rolf. He's the founding statistician general of Namibia and a former presidential economic advisor. He is also a senior advisor, or was a senior advisor, to the executive director of IMF. He was a chief economist and head research of Bank of Namibia and a group economist of CAM. And he is the incoming CEO of DBN. I think he is to start in October. I know he didn't want me to go into all his life like that, but I'm going to do that because people need to see the type of expertise that we have on our panel. And on the side note, people had so much interest in your photo. And just to mention that it's the love for the family that was exuded on that photo, and I like that as well. Then I have a friend of Fireplace Conversations, Mr. Salomo Hay. He is no stranger to us. He's the Managing Director of High Economic Intelligence, Hay, just as his surname. And he's the former MD of AMTA and is globally exposed and operated in South Africa for 4 years with demonstrated history of working in the research industry with a strong focus on economics and investments. He is highly skilled in capital markets, fundraising, local government, project financing, real sector economy, and data analysis. His professional experience spans over 16 years, and of which 9 years have been at an executive level, and he sits on several boards and is currently the chairperson of the NSA, and he's also exposed to multiple consulting and research projects, which we don't want to list tonight, but we know of. His academic experience includes a BA in Economics and Industrial Relations from the University of Namibia, BCom Honors in Trade and Development from the University of Johannesburg, and Masters in Development Finance from the University of Stellenbosch. He's also a Mati like me. We go right into it, and I think I'll start with Salomo, just because you're a friend of Fireplace Conversations and we want to induct our doctor to Fireplace Conversations. So are we speaking about beleaguered entities that are suffering financially? There are other aspects that we'll be talking about in future. We'll be talking about board management relationship. We'll be talking about shareholder interference and so on. But tonight, we just want to talk about companies that are suffering, that need to be bailed out, that need to be transformed into healthy entities. What are some of the tell signs of companies or entities, particularly public enterprises, that require business rescue interventions? Should we look purely at financials, the top line, the bottom line, and what are the indications of the opposite, the healthy entities? I think that's a mouthful.
No, Vensha, thank you very much, and good evening to your viewers. And once again, thank you for having me. I think we must take a step back in terms of how do the SOEs find themselves in the position that they find themselves in. Because it's critically important to sort of see the red flags before they become a concern. We must take a practical example of now Namibia. Yeah, I think one of the red flags that we should have looked at or investigated was really when the first bailout came, right? When the shareholder decided to give the first bailout, what was the accountability that the shareholder demanded on management at the time? When I say management, I'm referring to the board, then the executives within the institution, right? Because an institution does not become beleaguered immediately. It's a process. And one want to make sure that SOEs generally, and if you look at emerging economies that have done quite well, have centered SOEs as engines of growth, right? If you look, for instance, at the Singapore, right, there's now what they refer to as the entrepreneurial state, right? The entrepreneurial state that's being driven by the SOEs. So SOEs does not become beleaguered overnight. It's a process. And I think there's a huge responsibility to make sure that you've got the right people in place. Because, and the right people, I mean, if you look at PEGA, for instance, in terms of how board members are appointed, right? There is mention of expertise, right? And what one would want to see is really to say, what is the track record of the executive management outside of expertise that some of the board members carry? Because if that is not looked at, what you would have is a situation where when the first bailout comes, there's absolutely no accountability because the custodians of shareholder responsibility, which is the board, are not capacitated enough to be able to operate at that level. 1, 2, 3, too many. Another example that we can speak to is the roads contractor company, right? Now, think about the engineering world in which roads are constructed, right? It's a highly technical field. If I ask you today, how many engineers do we have in this country, right? And if you look at what the private sector is paying for highly accomplished engineers, right? And you compare to the salary caps that exist in SOEs for the different tiers, right? Again, that becomes a problem. Are you able to attract the best skills in engineering to be able to move towards constructing highly complex infrastructure like roads on a public sector wage, right? These are the questions that we need to ask. And how do you then align that to the output? So I wanted us to go a bit further in really saying that the process does not start in a bailout. The process does not start in privatization. Oh. You see, the process starts a bit earlier. Again, I want to refer to PEGA in terms of the criteria and what PEGA put forward as how SOEs should function, right? For instance, in terms of your 5-year strategic plan, when should it come to the line ministry, right? If you look at the performance agreement between board members and the line ministry, what is the enforcement mechanism in that respect? You see, what is the enforcement mechanism if the business plan is not submitted on time, right? So that when you drop the ball at that first instance is really you are almost in a position doing a catch-up. Now, corporate governance and good governance does not allow for that, unfortunately. You want to start right. You want to make sure that there's clear the guidelines in which the framework in which SOEs operate can be enforced. Yeah. And they can be enforced on accountability, they can be enforced on responsibility, as opposed to really always be in a position where you are reactive. So I think you can't throw money at problems as a way of solving it.
Correct.
Yeah, there must be a different intervention, and those interventions goes to the very core of why an institution is established. Would you really want to be in an engineering, given that you've got salary caps, right? Will you be able to attract the correct skills, right? Do you want to bail out, and then at the end of the day, saying that perhaps we should close down the institution? Again, sorry that I may be overlapping the Namibia issue, right?
Yeah.
So there should also be an appreciation of the business model of institutions, right? If you look at aviation as an industry, if you look at the IRR in the industry, they are very thin, right? To the extent that you find very few airlines that are profitable globally, right? What is the threshold in terms of the losses that you can absorb on the operational side, right? But you've got other multiplier effects that come as a consequence of this loss that you can absorb. If you are lending around 50,000 people on a monthly basis at Hosea Kutako, you say 70% of those, you can even take a conservative number and say 60% of that are tourists, right? And you do an estimation model on spending patterns and the actual, what would it cost for a tourist or family of 2 or 1 spending over 3-5 days? How much are they spending in Namibia? You look at, you build a regression on into or a formula into the occupancy rates at that point, right? And you would definitely have a picture. Can that 6% threshold, right? But this should come in the business plan, right? It can't come as a beleaguered SOE. It can't come as a solving a problem around a bailout, right? The business plan should be able to say, we should be able to be absorbing a loss due to certain factors that are within the industry that we find ourselves in, of between 7 to 9%. Where are you making up this? On the multiplier effect on the subsectors that feeds into this particular sector. So money is not the solution. I think there's a greater responsibility on governance. It's a greater responsibility on making sure that we get the right people, that have got the right capabilities, that have got the right experience, that have operated at a certain level to be able to drive strategic direction of SOEs.
That was quite a lot of information that we can extract from there. John, he prefers me to call him John and not Doctor. John, if I came back to you with that same question, Air Namibia is really a sad example of how a beleaguered entity could not be bailed out by the state. And despite, I don't know what efforts were made, it has gone down, it's shut down, and we don't have the national asset that we had at the time. What are those things that we could have done? Could we even have salvaged Air Namibia? And what can we learn just from that case study?
Somebody once told me, just when you think you have the answer, they change the question. and I think it's sometimes important to ask the right questions.
Correct.
And I think we should not get... It's good to have a case study, like a SOE, like Trans-Namib, but maybe we should rephrase the question. And the question is at the E of SOE. It's the question of enterprise. And I think we should ask the question is, why is it difficult for enterprises in Namibia to succeed?
That's a good question, actually.
I believe we focus so much on the SOEs, and the SOE landscape is very diverse. As far as I know, there are about 122 or odd entities that are classified as SOEs, and some should not even be classified as SOEs. If you drill a bit deeper, then there's maybe about 20 or 25 that are doing business, that are SOEs, that are enterprises. Commercial enterprise. Let's not say enterprise is commercial.
Okay.
Yeah, it's commercial. So have you ever wondered how difficult it is for an enterprise to do business in Namibia? Have you ever asked the question, how many enterprises never get born? Okay? Because it's difficult to be born. They never get conceived. There's an idea, and you have a brilliant idea to start something, then you want to start it, and it's extremely difficult to start it. Okay, then eventually you start it. How many of those enterprises, whether it's a PTYI, whether it's a CC, whether it's this or that, how many of them are alive? How many trans-Namibs or how many Air Namibias have died? Why are we not speaking about those Air Namibias that are not owned by the state? Because, you know, there must be a founder, there must be a shareholder. But how many companies have died, for example, over the past year? So I think we have to look at a question a bit more broader. Okay. I think sometimes we get fixated on, in the case of Namibia, we get fixated on 6 or 7 state-owned enterprises that are not doing well. Air Namibia failed, Trans-Namib, Midco is now in distress,
yes,
and so on. But have we ever looked at the business environment? When we speak about business rescue, okay, why are we speaking about business rescue for Air Namibia, and we don't speak about business rescue just for general businesses? And why don't we look at the business framework? So obviously, you know, the SOEs, they are owned by the public,
right,
by the state.
Hence the focus.
So therefore, it's legitimate for us to say that this is our money and we have to look at it. But I think we have to, if we have to look a bit differently at governance, the lens of governance should not just be solely on the SOEs. Governance should be across. Okay. Once you have a business entity, there should be governance. Correct. And when we look at why entities fail, we should ask that question more broader. So is it because of the shareholder? Is it because of other factors? Is it because the shareholder is absent? Is it because the shareholder is too much involved? So often you find when it coming back to, for example, state-owned enterprises, do we have a shareholder? And I want to maybe have this conversation with Salomo. Yeah. Is the shareholder too active or too absent? Is the shareholder active only when the fire is there? Where is the shareholder? If I start a business today, if I have a pot of money, and if I start a business today, I will make sure that I'm involved in that business. And I will make sure that I will steer that business to be successful.
But you appoint a board for that purpose. So for public
yes,
enterprises?
I will. The shareholder is the shareholder. The shareholder is the shareholder. Capital is capital. So my question is the shareholder too active or is the shareholder absent? Okay. And I think in most instances, when it comes to the 20-odd commercial enterprises, the shareholder has been too absent. And the shareholder has not given a clear remit and has not been actively involved in saying, this is what I want. I want this capital to be sweat. The shareholder has been absent, and the shareholder, when when the tire hits the tarmac, then a small bailout will come. We need active, as shareholder must be active. The point that I'm trying to make is that whether the shareholder is a private shareholder or a public shareholder, if I put my money in a business, I will make sure that that business will succeed. I will watch that business. I will appoint the most competent board. I will appoint the most competent CEO. And if that CEO doesn't perform, I will boot the CEO and I will boot the board. So is the shareholder too active? I hear a lot of cases where people say in Namibia, the shareholder interfere. But look, those are cases that we are aware of. But where is the shareholder when it comes to critical decisions and to give strategic decisions and to put money? You must also put your money where your mouth is, okay? So I think we create this picture that the SOEs are just failing. We have incompetent board members, we have incompetent CEOs. You can recruit today the most competent CEO, and tomorrow that CEO will look like the least competent CEO because that CEO is the CEO of a SOE. You can recruit the most competent board member today, and tomorrow that most competent board member will fail to turn around NBC. So we have to look at things a bit more differently. Holistically.
All right. So can I just stop you there and say that if we look at things holistically, from what I hear from both sides, I can hear that, it hinges on quintessential leadership, both at board level as well as management, including the CEO. It hinges on credible processes, systems, and procedures, legitimate policies. PEGA is there. Is it adequate? We've spoken last week or 2 weeks ago. It was actually the last week's session where we spoke a little bit more in depth about PEGA and what you mentioned about the appointment of boards and so on, and the ISBP. Those were issues that were raised, and those are red flags already that if they are not handled or addressed in the beginning, that would have to come at the back end and give a bailout. And then strong and efficient structures, organizational structures. I mean, you've spoken about the CEOs, the management, maybe whatever organizational structure there may be, and then the organizational culture. I think you were speaking about shareholder interference, whether it's lacking or whether it's too much. Whichever way it is, you can have good and bad examples. Right now, NamPower has its own issues with shareholder interference. Are we going to be anticipating another in Namibia in that situation because the shareholder is overly involved in matters that are strategic and which the board should be taking oversight over? And at the same time, when you look at Namibia, it was probably a more lax, and I said that when I was interviewed in that case, I said it was probably a lax shareholder who doesn't ask the pertinent questions from the board that it has appointed. You can't have annual financial statements that have not been audited, and you have an AGM, or you probably never call an AGM to look after the entities that you have created. Maybe that's another issue, that we don't call AGMs. So I'm just trying to look holistically on all these issues, procedures, systems, culture, structures, and so on. And maybe that's what you're saying. Is that what we are saying?
What I'm saying is, when we look at the SOE environment, we have to go a level higher, and we have to speak about economic policy.
All right.
So I've said two things. I will come back to the second one. Let me just kind of say this thing that we have to go a level higher, where we have to ask, as a state, as a nation, do we need some SOEs? So, and this is a matter of economic policy. So, if you're in a state where the state plays a key role in economic policy. And Solomon spoke about the entrepreneurial state. And I want to come back to that, but maybe if you just say, do we need, for example, an airline? So if you say that from an economic policy perspective, we have adopted a certain economic policy, then you say we allow, in the case of Namibia, we say mixed economy, and mix is more a market economy. Then you say, okay, is there market failure? If there's market failure, then you start an airline. If there's no market failure, do you need an airline? Is there market failure to bring tourists to Namibia? If there's no market failure, let the private sector do it. But where there's a case for market failure, you come in. And then you can have another question to say that in some cases, even if there's not market failure, but it's essential that people should have water. Let's have a water company. But if there's market failure in telecommunications, why do you need a telecommunications company if MTC is dominant and other companies are there? Why do you need a telecom, for example? So I think we need to have, as the shareholder, because when I speak of the shareholder, I speak of the state, because the state is the shareholder. So the state must decide, we will be in this sector because there's market failure. We need to give water to our people. We need to give electricity to our people. Then, yes, we start NemPower to give electricity. But does NemPower give electricity? Does NemWater give water to the people? So then they have to look at the efficiencies, and there's where the governance and things are coming in. But say, for example, when it's telecommunications, does the state need a telecommunications company? The other one is where it comes to, if I'm the state, I will ask, is it strategic? So there are some sectors that are strategic. And as the shareholder, as the sovereign, as the state of Namibia, I will say, I need to have a strategic shareholding in oil and gas, for example, because it's strategic for Namibia. So I think once the shareholder has that clarity on market failure, strategic, then they decide we don't even need some SOEs. And we can just let them go. RCC, maybe we can let it go or whatever. So there is, for me, that bigger discussion that should take place. Then thereafter is when we have that clarity where we want to be involved as the shareholder, then you say, now let me sweat the assets. Let me make sure those entities are governed properly.
So I hear what you're saying, and I think that last sentiment that you shared, let's make sure that they're governed properly. That's what we're here about, isn't it, Salomo? Yeah. I would like you to give that sentiment that you have in the back of your mind, but I would also like you to think about the Midco and Trans-Namib examples, the RCCs and so on. They're sort of like just hanging in limbo because they are failing currently, and they need state bailout. You've already said that state bailout shouldn't start now. It should have been prevented, okay? So now we're talking about entities that we can let go. Are we saying that should be a privatization conversation, or what is it that we actually talk about? Do you think about that?
Yeah. No, thank you. And I think the doctor makes a good point
Okay.
in terms of shareholder responsibility and shareholder accountability. But I also think that there's been very good examples in Namibia or within the domestic economy, where shareholder support is prevalent and has led to the success of certain SOEs. One of those is obviously the GIPF example.
Okay.
Right? GIPF stands for Government Institute of Pension Fund.
Yeah.
Right? What does it mean? It means that all government employees their pension fund is with the GIPF, right? You have seen that the governance framework that governs GIPF has led to a return where today is sitting on a pot of 150 billion, right? And either way you look at it, whether it's performance by asset managers, unlisted manager, I think the shareholders need to take credit at some point for that.
Of course, yeah.
And where you put who the shareholders is, whether it's the pension fund holders or government or whatever it is, right? So the point I'm making is that there's been examples where it has worked,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Social Security.
Maybe speak a little bit more on that as well before you go to the privatization conversation, where I would also like you to add
Absolutely.
more about those healthy entities.
Yes,
What makes them healthy? How can we learn?
Because shareholder support is clear, right? There's no gray areas about shareholder support in terms of making sure that GIPF thrives, right? And I'm not saying GIPF is perfect. I think there's been cases where some of the managed funds did not go as well as they did, right?
Yeah.
But I think the picture overall says that, look, this is a business model that has worked.
That is what
Or that is working. One of the biggest funds on the continent currently. Social Security is another example, right? And again, the shareholder is very clear in terms of what is the business model for Social Security,
That's good,
right? So there are no gray areas in terms of what is the function of Social Security. And shareholder is very clear in terms of how they want to see the business run, right? Whether it was advertent or inadvertently, the fact of the matter is that this business is running. And it's not perfect because we don't live in a perfect world.
Of course, yeah.
Right? Then you've got other SOEs, right? Where the doctor is speaking about was the shareholder absent, right? For instance, remember that during when NMB was operating, there was a directive or circulars that went out to say that, look, all public, yes, fly in Namibia. Right? What was the enforcement mechanisms to make sure that the same way that your pension sits with GIPF, the same way the ticket that you purchase is on an Namibia seat, right? So these are the sort of conversations that we need to have, because essentially, if you do that, you're likely to get to the results that perhaps the GIPF, Social Security, has been able to get to, right? So it has worked in certain instances. So that needs to be very clear.
Yeah.
And in most instances, you get that sort of certainty through the business plan, because the business plan informs how the business should be run. The business plan informs the level of interference. The business plan gives specific parameters in which the business should be run. Right? The doctor again spoke about something interesting when it comes to market failure, right? Now, and market failure, remember that I think during the early 2000s, they privatized railways in the UK. Railways actually went to the private sector, right? The UK is now have taken over back the railways because of perhaps what could be termed as market failure, right? Where government now is again more involved in making sure that the rail is maintained, infrastructure, and on and.
Yeah.
And then what is critical is that, look, if you go to the newspapers Friday on the classified section, right? You'll see many liquidations, right? And these liquidations granted private sector companies, right? A private capital, but and notwithstanding COVID, generally they are going through the same strain that some SOEs are going, right? But the point is, there's been success stories that was deliberate. Shareholder was very clear in terms of the business model. Shareholder made sure that there's accountability. If you step out of line, there's going to be punitive measures that will follow you. Right? Now, the one that we should keep our eye on and keep our eye on very closely is there's something happening at the procurement board,
Right.
right? Which is essentially an SOE, right? And there's something happening there in terms of, for instance, the food tender, right? A very clear guideline in terms of what should happen, right? Government schools need private sector participation to be able to make sure that schools and some of our facilities are supported, right? Award takes place, right? We end up in court, right? The courts make a decision, and with court cases, it takes forever.
Yeah.
What happened to enterprise at the time, right? And enterprise as a consequence of, did we not anticipate what some of these measures could mean to the Namibian economy? You see, and because on the one side you've got the corporate governance, strictly speaking, in terms of board, shareholder, and but the efficiency that comes as a lack of this governance filtering through to the processes that you are asking us about, right? Then you've got the bid validities that are extended, and that's what the good doctor is speaking about. Does this not then translate into what becomes perhaps a market failure? Because you've got an award that cannot take effect, becomes a court issue, and. So you look, for instance, at what transpired with the new kid on the block, oil, right? In terms of the NAMCOR thing, this, that, and the other, and right? Where do you see the corporate governance in it,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Where do you see the clarity around business operating model, right? In the manner that we are seeing with the GIPF, Social Security, and maybe because personal experiences really changes perceptions. You did say that I had a stint with AMTA, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you look at AMTA in terms of the infrastructure that AMTA owned or owns, huge infrastructure, right? And it's a marketing agency. It's one of its core functions is to be able to link farmers to the market, right? And the market, whether it's private sector or public sector, is to be able to make sure that fresh produce can come through to the market, right? Now, the shareholder invested quite heavily in the infrastructure. What you have is that the utilization capacity of these facilities is below optimal, right? What does that mean? It means that where you have this room, for instance, you're only utilizing 10% of the room, right?
Yeah.
But what is the point I'm making? The point I'm making is that if the shareholder then says, look, 1% of all dietary requirements as it relates to fresh produce should come from AMTA, right? In terms of hospitals, in terms of schools, in terms of whatever it is. What does it mean? It means that you would be able to bring about the necessary certainty to a business model that's AMTA, right? So there are pockets of successes, but then there are definitely where we are found wanting, and we really need to make sure, and I want to defer to the point that, look, do we give enough credence to those that are failing in relation to the private sector? I think the private sector talk is really private capital, and the inefficiency that comes, whether it's through what I refer to as the bid validity extensions, later there's no opportunity anymore. The same guys that has been involved continue taking place. There's no sort of seamless transition of business continuity, right? I want to sort of say, look, for an emerging developing economy, I think the economic policy that the doctor is talking about should be very deliberate in terms of what it is that we want to do. And I think where we have gone and what we are seeing now is that countries that has been successful took that route in terms of very clear policy certainty and deliberate intervention. And whether that deliberate intervention means that we should exit some SOEs, that perhaps we should not be in that business because of the skills deficit given the caps and the different that we have, perhaps that should be considered. But over and above that, I think if we can draw lessons from those where SOEs have been successful, I think we can really use that as a template and a benchmark for making sure that they can then follow the same route.
Yeah, and
I think
yes.
that certainty and clarity is very clear. Once it's not there, and you operate in an environment where you don't know where you stand, it creates confusion. And I think it's very imperative for us that we have to be clear about our economic policy. Coming back to the SOEs and corporate governance, I want to separate two things from the economic policy, because I've spoken more about economic policy. You've also asked questions of successes. In Salome, you raised two very interesting examples, GIPF and the Social Security. But I also want to raise one or two other examples, which is DEP Marine, NAMDEP. NAMDEP is 50% owned by the state of Namibia, by all the Namibians. MTC is how many percent owned by the state?
No, that it's listed
So you find sometimes where you have a collaboration between the state and the private sector. Those are companies that are flourishing. And sometimes you have those that are just 100% state-owned and they don't go anywhere. So when I advocate for I don't want to say I advocate for even privatization. I advocate for maybe a dilution of shareholding with a view that the GIPF of Namibia, which is a government worker, can own a share in MTC. That's empowerment, isn't it? So we also need to create instruments where we empower our citizens so that the wealth is diluted. It's not just there sitting at the treasury. So if I'm a government worker and now suddenly I have a shareholding in MTC, I have a shareholding in Bank Windhoek. Who's one of the biggest shareholders in Bank Windhoek? It's the GIPF. So it's the government worker. Is that not empowerment? So why can't we also use that model to empower our citizens? So then the other thing is, we are drifting away now because we are two economists. We speak now economic policy. So I want to come back now to governance.
Yeah.
And I want to ask the question: why is it possible for a 100% government-owned entity to be governed properly, just like a private entity?
You preempted my question.
And I believe it's possible.
Yes.
And Salomo already gave an example of, for example, the GIPF. So I think it's possible. It doesn't, and there are many private companies that have been governed poorly. Steinhoff has been governed poorly. So I think state-owned enterprises can also be governed properly, but then you need to do certain things. You need to have a competent board. You need to have a competent CEO, competent management. You need to have a shareholder that is not absent, but it's also not controlling.
Good, yeah.
Not too not interfering in the operations, and there may be other conditions as well.
Yeah.
But I will not want to be the head of a state-owned enterprise and the shareholders is calling me every day and say, John, what's happening here?
Yeah.
Why didn't you sell those things? So I think there's very, very important, and I believe that state-owned enterprises, if they have proper governance principles, and the shareholder plays a key role. So I come back to the shareholder, and I like this example. If you are the shareholder, if you are the government of Namibia, and you have to appoint the top CEO, but remember, you are the government. You own all the money. It's only you that can appoint. Who will you appoint? If it's your money, Namibia is your money now. Namibia is your country. If Namibia was my country, if it's my money, I will appoint the top board and the top CEO.
Okay.
And I will not, and if they don't perform, after 1 year I will boot them. And this is what happens in companies. And so therefore a shareholder must appoint people that are exceedingly competent.
I think that sounds like quintessential leadership that I pointed out. You've also drawn some focus on processes, procedures, reporting, business model, economic policies. All those are very important. And you know, as we're sitting and conversating or conversing, there's a lot of comments that are coming in and a lot of questions that are being thrown in there. I think some you are addressing, not unknowingly you are addressing some of them. But there's one that I want to highlight. It's the GIPF example that we've been using as a good example. But many of our viewers are saying that GIPF cannot fail because workers are injecting millions of dollars every month into it. So it's almost like a self-sustaining model, right? But how about those entities that don't have a model that's self-sustaining in essence? Is GIPF really a good example of an entrepreneurial state that Namibia, are we even an entrepreneurial state? Is that a real good example? Or is it really based on things that, it's just organic growth? Is it what it is? Or what can we do about other entities?
Yeah, no, I think, look, you must remember that GIPF becomes GIPF by the very nature of the business that underpins GIPF.
Correct.
Right? There could have been that, look, any pension fund, if it were, goes and bid for government pensions, if it were, or public service pensions. It could have been. You could have said that, look, you've got Salomo Hay pension fund, the Ministry of Health, employees, or the public service, whatever, in different pockets, Ministry of Lands, and they are, then you could have small pockets of pension funds, right? So that has not happened. There was a clear, deliberate intervention to say, how do we build a GIPF to the level that we do, right? And I hear the concerns in terms of, if you have the level of certainty with a GIPF where you start referring to it as you are clapping hands for a fish because a fish is swimming.
Yeah.
The same question can then be related to the example I gave on AMTA, right? AMTA should link the market with small-scale holder farmers, right? Why is there no measures to say that AMTA should then supply the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education? Why? And very clear, right? Because then perhaps we would not have the problems that we have. I gave another example of of Namibia, where if you look at the travel and subsistence or within government budget annually, right? If you allocate that to Namibia, and you do the sums, where do we get to, right? So it's not a misplaced question.
Yeah.
We should take the conversation further and say where success, where we have seen success because of shareholder support, if it were,
Yeah.
right? Perhaps if we extend shareholder support in a manner, we would have less, wouldn't have the number of SOEs that perhaps are failing.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, think about Midco, for instance, right? And I make the example that you must always go back in history in terms of where Midco comes from. And the country has changed drastically, right? And if the move is to privatize Midco, right? When you say privatization, what exactly is it that you are doing, right? Strip to the bone. What you are doing is that you are replacing people, right? Venture, who's the CEO of Midco, right? I'm the new owner of Midco. This is what the doctor make an example about, to say that.
But you know, the maybe it's, sorry to interrupt. If you look at the GIPF example and the social security example for the person that asked the question, it could, if there was not good governance at the GIPF, despite them getting their fund every month, the GIPF could have been bankrupt. The same with social security.
Yes.
And we have example. You know, GIPF went through pain, and it learned, and then GIPF started to change its governance practices. Social security, don't forget about the Harvard case. Social security was in shambles. So it's the same as the GIPF. It gets the monthly contributions. But if you don't have good governance, it will be in shambles.
Yes.
So for the other commercial entities, it's a bit more tricky. They have to compete head on with the private sector to get in the funding, and they should not depend on the government bailouts or the shareholder support, unless the shareholder says this is strategic. Say, for example, you take Ethiopian Airlines, and the Ethiopian government say it's strategic for us to be the dominant airline in Africa. And they put a lot of subsidies in Ethiopian Airlines. It's for no reason that Ethiopian Airlines is not just successful because it's so successful. It has a lot of government backing. It's like Emirates, a lot of government backing. But those governments have said, we want to be the hub in Dubai. We want to be the hub for Africa. We are going to suppress wages and so on. So that's why I said is where you come to the strategic and say this is a strategic sector for us. And where they make money, Dubai Airline or Emirates or Ethiopian Airlines, they don't make money in the airline, they make money in the hub. So it's like the thing like Air Namibia, we did not make money in Air Namibia, we made money in the tourism. And so then you say this is strategic, therefore we support Air Namibia because we know that although Air Namibia is loss making, it will bring the tourists. But now we say the tourists are still coming, although Air Namibia is not there.
Gone, yeah.
So that kind of theory has now been debunked, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just while you're there, you see, it doesn't undermine the opportunity lost due to lack of good corporate governance. You see, because you see, you
still need it.
Yeah, you still, because what then happened is that this opportunity of that first bailout is where the intervention should have come.
Yeah. Right.
It can't. You can't raise an argument to say we've been bailing out Namibia for the past 10 years.
Yes.
It doesn't. And what does it mean? You know, I mean, sorry again. We might drift here. But if you can't account for sugar at home as the head of the household, you wonder where's the sugar, right? Because you want coffee and all of that. The same thing. The level of accountability that's required from shareholder should go to that extent. But Doc, you took words out of my mouth. I wanted really to...
I do want you to come back to the privatization conversation.
Yes, there, Doc. Now, what you do is essentially you replace warm bodies. Essentially, that's what you are doing. You know? And it goes to the point that the doctor made to say, you need to get the best, right? And whether the best, and this notwithstanding some of the limitations that I raised with regard to salary caps but the best, whether it's private or public, the best will give you the best.
That's it.
This will give you the best. There's a saying that they say, what do you get when you throw peanuts to somebody? You get monkeys. So sometimes we have to incentivize the best. Otherwise,
Correct.
you will not get the best. And it's something that we have to accept. It's what it is.
I think the conversation on, we've had the conversation on helping beleaguered entities become healthy by using the healthy company examples, and we've also mentioned the strategies that we can use, mechanisms that we can use, solutions that we can use for entities that are beleaguered to become healthy. And I think you've mentioned a lot. I think that's what we can learn from. But obviously, there is that other aspect of privatization which you have touched on. And I just want both of you in final to sort of just go back there to that conversation of privatization and think about the frameworks that are in place. I'm thinking of the PPP, the public-private partnership committees, or the board and the act that's in place. And I'm thinking of the NIP-DP and how those work together or should work together to make privatization or even the partnerships a success story. Is it even a success story? You've already touched on the warm bodies that we are replacing, and that's really a huge issue that we should consider. But is there any other way that we can resuscitate and or rescue business using that strategy?
Yeah, look, I think the issue of privatization, again, there's no one size fits all, right? I think the doc spoke about the example of Steinhoff. I mean, if you look at what Steinhoff was selling to us, and remember that some of our asset managers here also had exposure to Steinhoff, right? So Steinhoff was seen as a highly successful private company, right? At the end of the day, it collapsed, right? It collapsed, shareholder value was eroded, you had a loss of incomes, and, right? So the point I'm making is that there are good examples where private efficiency has worked and has worked very well. Yeah. And there are examples where the agility with which private sector moves obviously outstrips the public sector, no doubt. But the institutional architecture that exists within the public sector is second to none. So the point that you're asking is, or the question that you're asking is, could we leverage these two successfully? And I think we can.
Correct.
I think we can because there are examples like the world-class Deb Marine that we have. They bought the Benguela. What is the ship?
Benguela,
The
yes.
Benguela ship. We went to their financial disclosure session, and they were saying within a year or two, they would have paid off that ship.
Wow.
Right? This is a highly successful public-private sector partnership, right? So yes, I'm really saying that if corporate governance is lacking, right, where clearly there was a collapse of controls in Steinhoff, it led to the collapse of Steinhoff, where there's a collapse of controls within SOEs, there will lead to a collapse of an SOE. So where we are able to leverage the strong comparative advantages of different sectors will definitely fly. And I'm really advocating for making sure that the operating model at the initiation should be very strong, because you don't want to be reactive. You want to make sure that you've got the right people that understand the ethics around corporate governance. Where there's a need to leverage skills between the private and public, you do that. And where you need to strengthen the public sector using benchmarks or templates that has worked, one should not be shy to do that, because taking the easy way out, which we think is privatization, doesn't always work.
Doctor?
I think, just to put in perspective, I don't think there's a strong case for privatization in Namibia. And it may seem that I contradict myself. So hear me out.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm saying that is that Namibia has never been a country that has been nationalized. All the mines are private. So if you go, for example, to other places, you find they nationalize the mines and then they privatize it. So Namibia, if you look at the number of state-owned enterprises that we have, 80% of them should never be privatized.
Okay.
Kraan should not be privatized, but
Yeah,
it's classified as a state-owned enterprise. It's a regulatory body. Namfisa should not be privatized. It's a regulatory body. Bank of Namibia should not be privatized. It's a regulatory body. The ECB should not be privatized. It's a regulatory body. So then if you take out of this 120 odd enterprises that we have, you end up with maybe 22 that are commercial enterprises. And then some of them are also wrongly classified. NEM Water should not be commercial. So now you sit maybe at the end of the day with 10 or 5 companies. Then you ask them, should they be privatized? So let me give 5 by name. NWR, should it be privatized? Should government be in tourism? Meatco, should it be? So you end up with like maybe 5 or 10 or 6 companies that you, because Namibia is not like, Namibia never owned the breweries. In some countries, the countries actually own the brewery. So we have never been like that. So we are, you speak of a pocket full, maybe 10 companies, Namib. Air Namibia is no longer there. The airports company, maybe you can say, should it be? And so I think we have an opportunity that we don't have to aggressively privatize, because we don't have companies to privatize. The majority of them, do you want UNAM to be privatized or NAS to be privatized or NAM Water to be privatized? It's just not there. Or the procurement board, should it be privatized? It's just not there.
Sensible, yeah.
But they are classified as state-owned enterprises wrongfully. They're actually statutory bodies. So we have to look at those few pockets that are eating government money and ask, do we need them? And then say, should we privatize? And I think we need to look at privatization a bit differently. And the way I want to ask it is through a question. Who's the owner of Twitter? Who's the owner of Facebook?
Elon Musk, Twitter.
Okay, Twitter is the wrong question. Actually, Elon Musk. Because I was going to have a follow-up question. Who's the owner of Amazon? Jeff Bezos. How much does he control? How many shares does he have? But he's the owner. Do you know he has less than 20% shares? You can be a 26% shareholder and still dictate the strategic direction of the company. So what I'm saying is government can use the opportunity to dilute shares, get money in the company and grow the company so that we have more services available to people, because these state-owned enterprises are starved of capital. They can't roll out the investment plans because they don't have capital. So government can still say, I'm going to share, I'm going to leave, and then you bring in the capital and we roll out our investment plan. And I still have enough shareholding to determine the strategic direction of the company. Is that not a win-win? So privatization doesn't mean you have now to sell everything.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a model that we can consider. But I like what Salomo said in the beginning. You can't throw money as a solution on a problem. I mean, and it sort of brings me back to a final comment on what you've just said, that we can throw in the capital, but if we don't have good governance practices, we are going to fail. And I think that's a bottom line. And I think you kept emphasizing that we can have all of these entities. GIPF is a good example. They have money coming in. If it was bad governance, certainly these monies would not hold and they would not thrive.
The question is, Vincia, if I can tell you today, if I bring in a private investor in a government company, do you think that private investor will tolerate bad governance?
Hopefully not. And it shouldn't be the case.
Therefore, the government should not throw money.
Yeah.
A private investor will come and a private investor will say, this is my money, I want to see that money brings money for me. So, but if one government throws money from the budget, that's the wrong thing. You shouldn't do that.
Doc, just while we're there, the level of accountability that the private investor demands on their investment, right? Shouldn't that also
should be the same
level of accountability
exactly
that the budget should demand on expenditure?
Exactly.
Because once you do that, then you will be able to know you put the right person in there, they adhere to the corporate governance, they adhere to PEGA. Failure to do that, there will be consequences.
Consequence management. Conversation gets really interesting, and like I said, the hour is never enough. But we have come to the end of our conversation, and I just really want to ask each of you, just in one sentence or in less than a second, to give us your closing remarks in terms of what is the one thing that should be done to make sure that our entities are healthy. Just one thing.
The one thing that I want every board member and every especially a CEO to do that gets money from the government must ask the question, what if it was my money?
Good.
Well, I think that the business model that informs SOEs should be scrutinized to make sure that there is a return on the investment. And that accountability should rest with a governance structure, which starts with shareholder, board, management. Because if there's no alignment of purpose all the way down or all the way to the top, you would have this detachment that we find. And the detachment comes from interference, detachment comes from not being able to have the right people in these roles of responsibilities.
Those are both great points, and that brings us to the end of our conversation. Very interesting conversation for tonight. And please join us. Thank you, viewers, for joining us tonight. Please join us again next Thursday, 6 p.m. On this live stream for another conversation on Fireplace Conversations with the NICG. It was really good to have our speakers. Thank you for your time and thank you for your expertise. I hope we can take from this and make better entities. We need these entities for Namibia to thrive. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.